Hello everyone, I'm Scott, and we're back for another daily look at Dominaria United spoilers. We got a number of interesting cards today to talk about, and I want to dive right in, but before we do that, I want to thank again our sponsor, Caffeinated Gamers, for sponsoring the video, and please remember to like and subscribe if you like the content for more videos. Let's go ahead and get started. Our first card of the day is Jotaro the Unifier. For 1 white, 1 blue, 1 black, 1 red, 1 green mana, you get a 5/5 legendary human wizard with the ability of legendary creatures you control get +X/+X, where X is the number of legendary creatures you control. Whenever you cast a legendary spell from your hand, exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a legendary non-land card with lesser mana value. You may cast that card without paying its mana cost. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So Jotaro has some really nice abilities. The problem that we're going to run into with Jotaro when it comes to standard is it's 5 colors. We've seen a few 5-color decks kind of be out there kind of on the fringes of standard, but they're really not competitive playable. So if you're looking to make a competitive deck, Jotaro isn't your guy, but if you're looking for a fun build around with Legends, Jotaro is a great card for that purpose because you get the advantage of extra card draw, and Jotaro is going to pump up each of your creatures that are legendary by +1/+1 for each other creature they have in play. So I think it's a interesting card. It's a nicely designed card, but the 5 different colors of mana is really the drawback to the card. So I don't think we're going to see much standard play with it unless we get some better lands or some other ways to produce different colors of mana. Next we have Relic of Legends. Okay, so this is a card I'm intentionally looking at with Jotaro because Relic of Legends might be something that could help make a 5-color Legends deck work. You can tap it, it's 3 mana, you can tap it for 1 mana of any color, and this is the ability that I think really pushes it forward, is you can tap an untapped legendary creature you control and add 1 mana of any color. So if you can play some low-cost legendary cards, like a Thalia, for 2 mana, you play a couple, play one for 3, 1 for 4, then hopefully with the mana that you already have, you've got 2 or 3 of the colors that you need, and then you can tap those legendary creatures to add 1 mana of any color, and then on turn 5 you might be able to get Jotaro the Unifier out into play. Now that's asking a lot, and I think that's going to be the drawback to this kind of deck building theme and idea, is it does take a lot because you got to play this on turn 3, you got to play another legend on turn 2, and you got to play another legend on turn 4. So you've got to have a number of legends in play before this ability really kicks in. But with 2 legends on the field plus a relic, that's going to give you 3 mana right there, and that might be enough to get Jotaro the Unifier into play. Our next cards is Chandler, our Ether Chandler. Okay, Ether Chandler is a 3 mana human wizard that when Ether Chandler enters the battlefield, you get to choose one of these options. Create a 1/1 white bird creature token with flying, return another target non-land permanent to its owner's hand, or the third option is draw a card. Now, normally we look at cards like this, it's a 3 mana 2, but you get something with it. You're going to get an option that will help advance your board state. So it's either going to, you've got a 2/1 on the field and you have a 1/1 bird, and so if it's early in the game, your opponent doesn't really have a board state, you might want to create the 1/1 bird, or you might draw the card. But later in the game, when you play Ether Chandler, then you would go to the point of returning another target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. So you could, in essence, take their best creature off the field, take a planeswalker off the field, because it's any non-land permanent that you can use that ability on. So I think, while this I don't think is a 4 of in any deck at the moment, it might be an include in a spells kind of deck. We do have developing a mono blue deck, and I think this might fit in there as a 1 or 2 of, to have kind of a special ability that will help you along the way. Our next card is Erte Resurrected. Erte is a legendary Phyrexian human wizard for 2 colorless, a blue, and a black mana. It has flash, so it can come into play on your opponent's turn, and that's when you're probably going to want to play the card. And when Erte Resurrected enters the battlefield, choose up to 1. So you can counter a target spell, an activated ability, or triggered ability. Its controller draws a card. So there's a definite downside to using the ability, but it could help you prevent something from coming into play that could change the board state in your opponent's advantage. And it can also destroy another target creature or planeswalker, and its controller draws a card. So for 4 mana, you get a 3/2 body, and you get to counter a spell, or you get to destroy a creature or a planeswalker. So I think this is a very, very playable card in Standard. I think the Esper deck, might run a couple copies of this. It's going to be competing in that spot with some other cards now. But I think this is a card that deck's going to definitely be looking at as another really good card that gives you a body and then also does something else that you want to do to your opponent. So I think this is a card that Esper's definitely going to have to be looking at, whether in main deck or definitely in the sideboard. Our next card is Urza Assembles the Titans. Again, this is a read-ahead saga. On Chapter 1, you get to scry 4, then you may reveal the top card of your library. If it's a Planeswalker card, it is revealed this way. Put it in your hand. Chapter 2, you may put a Planeswalker card with mana value 6 or less from your hand onto the battlefield. So you get to, in essence, cast a Planeswalker for free, because pretty much every Planeswalker in Standard right now is going to cost less than 6 mana. And on Chapter 3, you may activate the loyalty abilities of Planeswalkers you control twice this turn rather than once. So we get that ability to double down on your Planeswalker's ability. So if we get a Planeswalker Super Friends deck, this is a card that deck's going to want, because it is going to, ramp you into getting more of your Planeswalkers out and onto the battlefield. You're going to put a Planeswalker onto the battlefield for free, and then you're going to get that double activation of loyalties, which can be critical in finishing off opponent or moving your board state in such a way that you've taken control of the game. So that's where I really see this kind of card shining. And if we look at the Planeswalkers out there, there are a number of really good Planeswalkers already. We've got the Wandering Emperor in white, we've got Kaido, we've got Sorin, we've got the 3-mana Chandler. The only downside I see is, because this is double white, that could present some potential mana problems to decks as they want to build around. And if they're leaning into other colors more for the Planeswalkers are getting, it's going to make it a little bit harder to cast this. But I think this could easily fit into a Super Friends deck. So if you have a deck that's got a lot of Planeswalkers, 10, 12 Planeswalkers, this is a good card to include in that. Otherwise, it's not really something that's even Standard playable. But that's the deck we'll see it. Now, is that a Tier 1 deck? Probably not, but it's a fun build-around card if you love to play with Planeswalkers. Next, we have Silverback Elder. For 2 colorless and 3 green mana, you get an Ape Shaman that, when you cast a creature spell, choose 1. Destroy target artifact or enchantment. Look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may put a land card from among them onto the battlefield. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. You gain 4 life. This card is awesome, okay? Because every time you cast a creature card, when this is on the field, you get an ability. You can kill an enchantment or an artifact. You get to look at the top 5 cards of your library. You get to pull a land out, or you gain 4 life. This is going to see Standard play. Whether it's in a mono green deck or some other kind of deck, this will see Standard play throughout the next 2 years, because creature activated spells or abilities like this, where you just cast a card and you get another ability, are really, really powerful abilities to have in Standard in particular, where we've got a much smaller card base to look at. So I'm excited about this card. I think this is a card that could very easily be something that moves mono green or maybe a Gruul deck up to that, A tier, top tier kind of decks, because you get so much value. And we have a lot of value cards in green right now, and this is just another good one. So I think we're going to see a green kind of value deck form once we get going into Dominaria United Standard season. Our next card is Academy Lore Master. For 2 blue mana, you get a human wizard. That at the beginning of each player's draw step, that player may draw an additional card. If they do, spells you cast this turn cost 2 more to cast. So I find this is a really interesting design, in my judgment, because there's a downside you have to pay 2 more to cast a spell. But if you're at a point where you have a lot of mana on the board, this is a great card because you get to draw 2 cards on that turn. So maybe you have to pay a couple extra mana, but you've got that excess mana anyway. So I see in a blue deck, you could include maybe 2 copies of this as a late game. I want to make sure I'm drawing more cards. The downside isn't all that bad for me because I've got a lot of mana anyways. So I can see that being something that blue players are going to want to have in their deck, particularly in something maybe like a blue control deck, or even potentially a blue creature deck, because when we get that mono blue tempo kind of deck. And the reason I'm saying that is this, because that extra card draw, even though there's that drawback, is such a powerful ability. You don't have to pay for it at all. You just have to pay extra mana on the turns that you want to do it. And when you're empty-handed, this is a good way to refill your hand. Next we have Shadow Rite Priest. Okay, for a colorless and a black mana, you get a human cleric that with the abilities of other clerics you control get +1/+1. For 5 mana, 3 colorless and 2 black, you can sacrifice another cleric, search your library for a black creature card, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle. So this is a very interesting card. Right now, we've seen it, almost all of the, I guess we've seen now all of the lords that we're going to see in the set. This is an interesting one because of that sacrifice ability. You can sacrifice a cleric, you can go get a card from your library that you want. Now, right now, blacking clerics probably doesn't work very well because the best black clerics, the best white clerics, those are rotating out of Standard. But there's still some left over from the 4 sets that we're retaining. So it'll be interesting to see if this can be a build-around card. And maybe what you're doing is, you've got some very large black creatures that you want to get into play, and this is for 5 mana, maybe you have something that you really need for your board state, and this is a way to go tutor it up and put it on the board, which I think is a really powerful ability in any deck. So I think this is going to see play. I'm not exactly sure where it fits in this current Dominaria United Standard season, but I guarantee that in about a month, somebody's going to figure out how to really use this card effectively because of that sacrifice a cleric ability. So I think this is definitely going to see some play in Dominaria United season. And again, I think it's just a matter of somebody figuring out how to really stack this well with the right black creatures to make it work. And that those black creatures could be dragons that we've gotten. We've got a couple black dragons that we could use. We've got some other large black creatures. So this might be a way to dig through your deck. So we've got that demonic tutoring ability to go in and get whatever we want. So I think this is a really good card for Standard play, and it probably plays well in other formats too. Because I think as we're leaving the 4 sets, Kaldheim and our Strixhaven set and our Realm sets behind, and our Zendikar set behind, there were some really good clerics in those decks. We have Luminarch Aspirant, We have Righteous Valkyrie. So I can see a Pioneer deck potentially being built around this card and that ability to go get black cards. Next, we have Baird Argivian Recruiter. Baird is a 2 mana, 1 red, 1 white creature that's legendary and a human soldier. At the beginning of your end step, if you control a creature with base power greater than its base power, create a 1/1 white soldier creature token. So we've seen a bunch of lords that synergize with soldiers. So I think this is going to be a perfect card to include in that soldier deck that I think probably will be built out within the first week or two of Dominaria United Standard season, because we've got King Darien, the 48th, that gives everything +1/+1. We also have things like Wedding Announcement that give everything +1. It takes a few turns, but it gives everything +1/+1. So it's very easy to see within a very short amount of time you having the ability to just create more and more board presence every single turn with these cards. So this is, to me, a definite inclusion in that deck. So I think we're going to see a green, red, and white soldier deck that I think is going to be pretty powerful given the right combination of cards. Next, we've got some lower rarity cards that I want to talk about because I think they're going to see play in Standard. Now, are these 4-ofs in every deck? No, they're not. But they're in certain styles of deck, they're going to be very powerful. The first one is Combat Research. Combat Research for 1 mana, you get an enchantment that's an aura. So you get to enchant creature, and the enchanted creature has, whenever this card deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. This is Adventurous Impulse, so we're seeing this idea of, when we've seen this from all the way back to Ixalan, where in blue, you do damage to an opponent, you get to draw a card for doing that damage. So I think this is going to see definite play in blue decks that want just card draw that's incidental. So if there's a mono blue tempo deck is going to be out there. Definitely is going to want this card in it because it's such a value engine for the deck. We haven't really looked at this as an idea, but sometimes we have Azorius Flyer decks that become successful, and this is a good deck. And we also have already some creatures that are unblockable in blue that I think you attach this to it, that makes those cards even more powerful as we move into Dominaria United Standard Season. And on top of that, it has a secondary ability that's even more helpful to the card, because as long as the enchanted creature is legendary, it gets +1/+1 and has ward. So if you attach this to a legendary creature, you get an added benefit of that +1 and that ward. And ward is a thing that does disrupt opponents' game plans. So Combat Research, definitely going to see it in Standard. What deck right now? Not sure, but we're going to see it. Second card is Impulse. So for a colorless and a blue mana, you get an instant that looks at the top 4 cards of your library. Put one of them in your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. Now, this isn't draw 2, but we're leaving behind a standard set that has a very similar card in it that has been used very, very successfully. In fact, it's gotten banned in some of the other formats. So Impulse, while it's probably not a 4-of in any deck, it's probably a good 1 or 2 of, so you got some filtering ability to go dig for a card that you want, and then the added bonus of it's only 2 mana, so you get to dig a little bit and hopefully pull something you really, really want out of it. And our last card of the day is Erte Scorn. For a colorless and 2 blue mana, you get an instant, and this spell costs 1 blue less to cast if an opponent casts 2 or more spells this turn. Counter target spell. So this has the ability, that your opponent casts a spell, and then you counter the second spell. Erte Scorn does that for 2 mana. even as a 3 mana counter spell, you know, this is pretty typical on rate for counter spells in Standard, so I think it's playable from that standpoint anyways. But there are going to be times when you get that added bonus. They've cast another spell, you didn't care much about it, but the spell that they're casting, now you want to counter, and instead of having to pay 3 mana, you only have to pay 2. Alright, that's it for today's Dominaria United spoilers. We've seen almost the entire set at this point. There'll be a card dump tomorrow. You know, we've got about 40 or 50 more cards to see from Dominaria United. Now, here's the reality from those cards. They're going to be the lower rarity cards, mostly going to be commons, but there's going to be some interesting stuff in there. Because one of the things I really haven't seen across the entire set are 1-cost creatures in a variety of colors. So hopefully we're going to see some of those tomorrow, because those are going to be important to us, because sometimes those become stars in the format because of their low cost. Alright, well that's it for today. Again, thank you to Caffeinated Gamers for sponsoring this video, and I'll see you next time.